you confused about gender? Well, that would be understandable. I mean, when I was a child growing up and I was introduced to the word gender, it was very simple. Boy, girl. I knew how to identify what boy looked like. I knew how to identify what girl looked like. We knew what body parts boy had. We knew what body parts girl had. It was a pretty simple, clear concept. Now, in 2023, oh Lord, the word gender gets people triggered. As a matter of fact, friendships have been ruined. Arguments have been convened when the word gender has been introduced. So, bearing all of that in mind, we're gonna behave like big people because we're gonna have a talk about gender. We're gonna have a conversation, yes, about gender. Hi, I am Shelly-Ann Weeks, author, activist, Jamaican. Let's talk about gender. This is the Big People Business podcast. Now, stereotypically, whenever I'm talking about anything, I like to do a little research. I mean, some things I'm pretty knowledgeable about, but even those things, I always like to, just see what else I probably didn't know, or to just reinforce some things that I already knew about the topic. And I did this with gender, and it was a very interesting experience. I will take you along with me. The first thing I did, I tried to find a definition for gender. I found many. Let me tell you a few. Dictionary.com defines gender as the male sex or the female sex, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological one. Wikipedia says gender includes social, psychological, cultural, and behavioral aspects of being a man, woman, or other gender identity. There's more. Webster's dictionary says gender is the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one sex. There's more. I went to Cambridge. Cambridge says gender is used to refer to the condition of being physically male, female, or intersex. I'm going to tell you what intersex is in a minute. But you can see from those 4 definitions that I've given you from 4 different sources that while there is some similarities to how they define gender, it is not a clear-cut one definition, boom, this is what gender means. And I started off the conversation like this because this is the source of a lot of contention and disagreement with a lot of persons, especially when they think about how gender is treated in our current situation and culture. And just before I get into the meat of this conversation, I just want to put the disclaimer out there. This is not any attempt to indoctrinate or to push any agenda. We're just trying to gain a better understanding of what gender actually means in a modern context, because whether we like it or not, it's not the same as what you were taught as children. And it's been a while since I've been a child. Yeah? As big people, we should be able to speak about different topics, even if we disagree with them and even if they make us uncomfortable. Right? Okay. So, I told you before that I always like to find out the different definitions and the different ways that people look at a particular thing. So let's go there. Let's start by establishing a few baselines. I just told you what gender is from 4 different sources. Now we hear some terms being thrown around when we talk about gender, and we're going to define some of those terms. The first thing is gender identity. Now, gender identity refers to how individuals see themselves in terms of being male, female, etc. So this is about what goes on internally. This is about how one identifies themselves as it relates to gender. Hold that. Gender expression. This is now, I'm checking the data. The data says gender expression is how we present our gender identity through our appearance, including what we wear, how we style our hair, or even if we wear makeup. So that is now the expression. So you look at it. Gender identity is internal. Gender expression is external. Good. Another term that we need to consider in this conversation is biological sex. Now, biological sex is a combination of your anatomy, aka body part, reproductive organs, and chromosomes. Now, that is when you get into the conversation about DNA, XX, XY, chromosomes. Yes, my scientists, my biologists represent. Now, biological sex is pretty straightforward. That is what we understand as a child growing up. Biological sex is usually what happens in the hospital room when you're born. They look at what you come with and they say, boom, girl, boom, boy. Biological sex. All right? Now, I introduced a term earlier, intersex. And I want to talk about intersex in detail. Now, intersex is something that actually happens in nature. It's an anomaly. And what intersex means is that someone who is intersex may have a sexual organ or sexual characteristics, that word always give me a problem, characteristics that are not definitively male or female. It could be even both. Let me explain. I know some of us are familiar with the term hermaphrodite. And a hermaphrodite really is someone who has both male and female genitalia. Now, a lot of the times, one is more dominant than the other. Maybe one doesn't work at all. Maybe one sort of look different, or, you know, it's not fully developed than the other. But usually when persons have both or evidence of both genitalia, there is one, the male side or the female side, that is usually more dominant. So you see somebody that presents stereotypically male, but they might have ovaries. That's the thing. That person is intersex. So we don't use the term hermaphrodite anymore. We say intersex. Babies are born sometimes without any definitive organ. They just have, sometimes it looks like a little hole. Sometimes you can't look at it and say, well, boom, this is a penis, or boom, this is a vagina. And when those babies are born, sometimes the doctor and the family makes a decision to say, all right, we don't know from looking at what we're looking at if this is a girl or a boy. However, we won't be able to tell until they hit puberty. But what some doctors, and with the consultation of their family, decide to do is to assign a gender at that point. So what they'll do is, most of the time they assign female, just because the female anatomy is easier to fashion. I'm probably saying it wrong. Doctors, feel free to help me in the comment section. But there have been a lot of cases, well, not a lot, there have been a few cases where the baby isn't clearly female, but they decide to raise and to assign the baby female, and therefore they give them the body part. And eventually when they hit puberty, then you'll see the hormones kicking, and then they get the secondary sexual characteristics that come with puberty at that stage. So that's what intersex is. I hope I didn't spoil that up. And the bummer of the gender conversation, this one, when people hear the word and them just get cross. Transgender. Transgender, let me read. I told you I did some research. Transgender occurs when an individual presents with one biological sex but identifies as another. Remember when I spoke about gender identity and gender expression? So their gender identity is male, but they present as female. So biologically, in terms of the organs that they have, it's female. However, their psychological, internal expression, identity of themselves is opposite from what they have externally. That is transgender. Now, transgender, the whole conversation around transgenderism and the pronouns and the upsetness of transgenderism is something that I'm not going to get into right now, but I want to make a clear point that every transgender person is not the same. Meaning, you have some people who internally they know that they are this, and what they feel inside is not evidenced outside at all. And so they want to make a full transition from what they are, what body parts they have externally, into another gender. So they are willing to go and do the whole transformation. They want to do the hormones. They want to take on the characteristics, and they want to do the surgeries and the entire transformation. They are invested. It is something that they will not be happy until they are fully transformed. That's one section of transgenderism. However, you do have some transgender people who are, even though they identify as one gender, they still keep the body parts of the gender that they were born with. For example, you see evidence of trans men. Trans men were biologically born women, born with the female genitalia, but they identify as men. And they take testosterone and they start to grow in the facial hair, and they start to dress and represent and express themselves. Their gender expression is male. If you see them walking down the road, you will think that they're a man until they get naked and you realize that they still have a vulva, they still have a vagina, they still have all the internal workings. As a matter of fact, this is a part of the controversy now, because you have some of these individuals who still go ahead and have children. So they present as male. Everything about them, if you just meet them, just one day and say, hi, this is Michael, and say, hi, Michael, you don't question nothing about it because they present fully man. But Michael is pregnant because Michael still has the ovaries and the fallopian tubes and the uterus. And so even though really they're living their life as a man, they still engage in activities that is normally considered stereotypically female activities, like having children. Many cases of that exist right now. As a matter of fact, there, even with the language, there are some trans men that are petitioning to be called fathers to their children that they gave birth to. That's why they want to change the language to say fathers can give birth to, because they identify as fathers, not mothers, even though they are the ones carrying the children. I know I'm confusing you. I apologize. But just I tell you, Wagwan, this is what it is. Okay, bear with me. Now, another section of the transgenderism is that there are some people who they will live their life fully as one gender, even though they were born in the body of another gender, but they don't do any physical changes. They just put on the clothes. They just put on whatever the clothes is. And so they identify as whatever, man or woman, but they still have their original biological body parts. Sometimes it's because they can't afford to do the surgery yet because, you know, poverty. And other times it's they don't want to live life as the gender that they were born in. They don't want to live life, I shouldn't say gender, as the sex that they were born. They want to live life as another sex, right? So that's a part of the transgender journey as well. And there is another section, another group that I didn't mention before, and this group is agender. Yes, I said it, agender, as in agender. That's a word. And this word describes individuals who don't see themselves through the lens of gender at all. So you might hear somebody say, I'm not a man or a woman, and I'm not any of the other things. I don't identify with gender. I am not a gender specific person. I'm a human being. It's a lot. All right. So that is what I wanted to tell you about those different definitions. Now, believe it or not, transgenderism or even multiple genders outside of male and female is not a new thing. Historically, there are different societies and cultures that have third, fourth, or even fifth genders in them, and I'm going to tell you about a few of them. Now, in Hindu society, there is a gender called Hijra. Hijra is the most common non-binary identity recognized in India today. That non-binary means that they don't identify as male or female, and the Hijras found in Hindu religion, and they are situated in South Asia, and many Hijra are born with male sexual characteristics, though the Hijra community also includes intersex people. And the unique culture underlies the Hijra identity, and they are often living in different groups because they are recognized as figures in spirituality. All right? And a lot of them assume religious roles in the Hindu culture, and they celebrate in rituals like weddings and births. All right? So that's the Hijra. In the ethnic group of South Indonesia, they recognize 3 different genders outside of male and female. So they have male, female, and these other 3. I'm going to tell you. One of them is Kalelai, and the Kalelai refers to people who have female sexual characteristics but present in traditional masculine ways, often cutting their hair short and dressing in men's fashion. They also take on social positions similar to men's, transcending some restrictions that are placed on women. So that is the Kalelai. Now, the Kalebai are people who have male sexual characteristics but occupy the role that is traditionally occupied by women. So this is the opposite. And they don't identify as women, and they reject the restrictions that are usually placed on women. And they do not have their sexual characteristics altered. So this is one of the groups that they embody it, but they don't change anything at all about their bodies. And they're often used to oversee weddings and manage different aspects of those ceremonies. Now the Bisu, we are still in South Indonesia. The Bisu is another gender that embodies the totality of masculinity and femininity. So this is a little bit of both. Bungis people believe that the Bisu surpasses other genders, encapsulating a spiritual role. So I just introduced you to 3 other genders outside of male and female in different cultures. There's another one, Muses. Muses is a community of people in Mexico who typically have male sexual characteristics but embrace a feminine identity. The word muse bears similarity to the word for women, which is mujer, and muses often take on household roles that are typically identified with women, such as sewing, cooking, and family care. Now, there are others, and feel free to go ahead and find out about them. And I'm telling you this because we talk a lot about the transgender conversation because we are focusing on what's going on in the news and in the world right now. And there are a lot of debates, especially politically, about the rights that transgender people have. And there's a whole heap of conversation around the terms that transgender people would like to be used when referring to them. And even the whole debate about where biological women differ from trans women, and whenever this conversation comes up, you know, persons get very heated because some of it is considered transphobic. I don't agree, but I don't want to get into the political side of the conversation here. That is for another video. Right here, I really just want us to get a better understanding of what the different genders mean and what somebody say when they say they identify as this gender and that gender. All right? So you might be watching me right now and wonder, Shelly, why should I care about all of this? And you don't have to care if you don't want to. I mean, the truth is, in Jamaica, we still only identify male and female as genders. But I will say that Jamaicans are global citizens, and we travel a lot. And even here in Jamaica, we do business with a lot of international companies, and we might find ourselves in a space where we need to relate to somebody or to work with somebody who might identify as a gender outside of what we are typically experiencing here in Jamaica. And I think in that circumstance, it would make sense for us to know when they say that they are intersex, what that means. To know when they say they are, however, identify, for us to know what that means. And then you can decide how you want to respond from there. This is not an effort to get you to change your mind about how you feel about which gender is what gender, or even if you want to participate in the gender conversation. But remember this, the world is different. We don't control everybody in the world. And even though there are things about different lifestyles that we are not in agreement with, or we don't find kosher, or we may find uncomfortable, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't understand what it means, so that at the very least we can know what it is that we disagree with. Make sense? I think so. So there's no gender agenda here. You don't have to do anything with this information that I gave you, but I am a fan of knowledge, and I think that ignoring something doesn't make it disappear. And just because we have a problem with something doesn't mean that people are not going to live their life that way. And based on how the world is right now, the likelihood of you coming across somebody who is transgender or intersex or any of the other genders that I just told you about is very high, especially now. It's just what it is. Now, big people, this is the Big People Business Podcast. As a big person, it is important that you have the maturity to function in a space where you disagree with a certain topic or a certain person and still remain respectful. I think that's a standard, that's a hallmark of being a mature person. And as I know, with life, we are never going to agree with everything, and we are going to continue to find things about this world that makes us cross, and we are going to disapprove of quite a lot of it. And that's okay, because we can disapprove of it, we can dislike it. What we cannot do is make people stop doing what they want to do in their life. So it's what it is, right? What else did I want to tell you about this gender thing now? Tell me what you think. Have you ever found yourself having to converse with or deal with somebody who is of a different gender? Have you ever met a transgender person? If so, what was that experience like? Are you a transgender person? You don't have to out yourself, but if you'd like to share your experience, feel free to do so in the comment section. Another thing that I want us to be mindful of is a conversation around gender and children. Now, I know a lot of Jamaican parents are like, oh, I don't want my child learning about any gender business. Okay. But here's what. Your children don't feel the same way you do about this. And there are other things that your children don't feel the same way about. And let me just say, before I say anything else, that I am nobody's parent. And I know that because I've never given birth, some people think that doesn't qualify me to have anything to say about this. But I'm going to say it anyway, because we're big people and I can say what I feel like say. And I think that the best way to help your child maneuver themselves in a world where gender is evolving is to not hide it from them. Because either they're going to learn with you or they're going to learn without you. But they're going to learn. And no matter what the question is, ignorance is not the answer. Now, I know when people heard me talk about transgender earlier, they expected me to come up here and talk about pronouns and talk about all the famous transgender celebrities and all of that, and I'll eventually talk about that, but that's not what this conversation is about. This particular conversation is just about introducing the topics and introducing you to the terms so you can get a better understanding of them. So feel free to leave the comments and tell me if you want me to talk about gender more, because whether you want me to or not, I am going to. Come here, big people. Yeah, and this is big people business. Please feel free to put your question and comments in the comment section, and definitely tell me your experience dealing with people with gender identities outside of the male and female binary. I'm gonna leave it right there. I am Shelly-Ann Weeks, author, activist, and Jamaican, inviting you to join us one more week next week for another episode right here of the Big People Business Podcast. See you next time.